Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Virtuous Insider, the very first edition. I'm Megan Donahue. I'm the content marketing manager here at Virtuous, and I'm joined by Stephanie Larson, who I believe can come on camera, but we're figuring out Zoom as we go. So I want to first welcome all of you and tell you how excited we are to get to spend this time with you, our customers. We have lots of opportunities to spend time with our greater community. We have our Responsive Weekly every Thursday at noon Eastern, where we talk about fundraising topics, but we realized that we wanted to have a deeper conversation with you, the customers who are using Virtuous, so that you can form a community together as users and get all the inside scoop on the product, on what's happening, and what you can use Virtuous for and how you can get results. So I'm going to take just a second here to see if I can get Stephanie on camera. See how that goes.
Well, should be able to hear me though, so
I can hear her
that's
voice.
half the battle. Woohoo!
All right. Stephanie, can your camera turn on? Hi, I see your lovely face.
Hi, Megan.
Great. Rocking and rolling. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting series, I think. Got a lot of variety of activities planned.
Yes. And I think it'll be nice to kind of be able to pop through different ideas and concepts and, taking them as concepts themselves and then really putting them into action into Virtuous and really implementing them. So I think that'll kind of be a fun balance and be able to talk strategy, talk high level, but then also kind of get our hands dirty in the database, if you will.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting for me because I spend a lot of time. This is really all about me, the Virtuous Insider. I spend a lot of time talking about fundraising on a higher level as we talk about responsive fundraising and what that looks like and how we might do it, but really getting into the weeds of like, okay, automation, what is that and how does that translate into what do I actually do? I'm really excited to have those kinds of conversations.
When I laugh because I'm the flip side of that, where I'm in the product all the time. I'm in Virtuous and I'm, building automations and working with clients and things like that. So it's kind of fun to take a step back and look at, what are all the decisions and the high level pieces that, happen before we even get to Virtuous. So kind of a fun balance.
Yeah, I think so. So we've got lots of plans. And of course, this is a new thing. So we'll be developing it as we hear more from you, our customers, about what's of most interest to you. But some of the things we think are coming up are product insights, client success stories, which is what we're going to dig into a bit today, responsive strategies and implementation tips, and then training.
My world.
It's a good thing we're doing this every week. So we're going to jump right in to talking about our topic of the day, which is automation. And we talk a lot about automation as it is one of the keys to being responsive. As far as I always say, I don't know, that's actually that great that a saying that I always say it, but it's like as soon as you have more than 10 donors, the only way you can be truly responsive to each and every donor in your file is if you have some kind of technology supporting you. Obviously, we think Virtuous is a great kind of technology to be supporting you. It makes a lot of things possible that just wouldn't be. So one of the cases that we're looking at is one of our most recent case studies, which is YWAM Orlando, who's done some interesting things with automation in their communications. And Alistair Cuthbertson there at YWAM said this great thing that I really wanted to share with the community, which is that the reality is the modern donor is not looking for generalized communication. They want personalized communication. With Virtuous, we are finally able to do that. But how? Well, we'll look at what they did. So they had an interesting thing happening that I think a lot of nonprofits can identify with, and especially educational institutions, where they had very distinct audiences they needed to talk to. that did not have that much in common other than supporting YWAM Orlando. They're a missionary training program, and they had a community of supporters, donors, that kind of whole bucket. And then they had alumni who they also needed to communicate with. But they couldn't do it with their previous software. They had very generalized communications, which Alistair identified as a weakness in fundraising when he couldn't target, like, this person is a student who just graduated from our programs and is going out into service. They shouldn't be getting the, like, do you want to be a monthly donor kind of communication, or, those kinds of things. I think lots of people have been the recipients of inappropriate asks from their alma mater.
Oh, yes.
And you're like, I'm paying on these student loans. Why are you asking me for more money? Like, so they wanted to be able to speak directly to alumni and people who needed that kind of communication, and to be able to speak directly to their donors, and then even more personally to their donors. One of the other things that is also, I think, very common to nonprofits is they had a lot of donors and they have 5 people on their fundraising team. So without a CRM that could track donor signals and milestones, again, you have more than 10 donors, keeping everybody's birthday in your head and recognizing, like, oh, you're reaching a giving threshold, or you've been giving for 3 years and we should celebrate that, becomes impossible. But with Virtuous, it's not, because your CRM can actually surface those things for you. And then you can create triggers and communications and workflows that come off of that.
Well, and Megan, you even mentioned one really great thing that we actually talk about on the training side a lot, kind of getting into those practical tips and examples is, you might have someone in your world that's supporting your organization, but maybe they haven't given financially. Maybe they've given in other ways, with their social capital, with their time, things like that. And so it's, taking that practical look at, this person is supporting us, but not financially. So it would be inappropriate to send them that, like, welcome to the organization. We're excited to have you, if they've been a part of that organization for a while and just given in other ways. So listening and hearing how your donors are giving, and being able to comment on that. Like that's one of the first things we talk about when we're doing training with automation is, what was that last step that donor had, and what's the next step? Because it really is different for everyone. Everybody is on their own path within, your donor relationship. And so that's one of the pieces we really talk about heavily in the automation kind of training aspect.
Yeah. And looking at that as a whole ecosystem of support, instead of just like, well, I have the data that they made a gift. And then that leads to not really speaking to the relationship you have with them. Like you said, Stephanie, if I've been a volunteer for 40 years and I made my first gift, getting a like general, hey, this is what the organization's about, you probably don't know since you're so new, kind of message would be really off-putting, right?
Yes, very much.
So being able to look at the whole picture of who the supporter is and the different ways they've supported you, and then communicating with them in a way that is relevant to that, I think is really important.
Yeah, very, very much so.
So YWAM did some cool things with their automation. I think we're ready for the next slide. Yes, so they did a lot of workflows where they could engage contacts by segment. So they could get targeted and very, very personal. And they created a lot of triggers for communication and task workflows, such as now their alumni get a post-graduation email series that's 7 emails long that goes over the weeks after their graduation, continually engaging them, speaking to them in a relevant way. And it's a thing that happens automatically of, did a class graduate? Okay, they are in, they go, and now they get those emails and they don't have to think about it anymore. They do a lot of event-triggered communication. You came to this thing, so now you get something that references that you came to the thing and that you learned the things you learned, or saw the things you saw, or did the things you did, which is great. and really like ups that relevancy. A thing that is really interesting is they have milestone triggered communication and donor signal triggered communication, which I think is really exciting. Um, Being able to recognize milestones and have those brought up to you so that you can recognize them makes such a difference in relationships. And this is again where Virtuous can really help you, because you personally, if you see a gift come in that's like, hey, donor X gave me $50, me, us, our organization, the cause, they gave the cause $50. That's awesome. But you probably don't have in your head like that $50 means that their lifetime giving just went over 10,000 or something like that. Whereas in Virtuous, you can get the signal to be like, oh, that is not $50 that is $50. That is the $50 that got us to this milestone that we should recognize and celebrate.
And I love too. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Megan.
Oh, no, you got it.
I was just going to say, I love too looking at it again holistically as that bigger picture of the donor. Having a small staff, as most organizations do, that are reaching out to and working with and engaging such a large group of donors, doing the research to figure out that $50 is the threshold of, or pushing them over the threshold, excuse me, of reaching 10,000. Like that's a huge lift to try and think of, go find, research, and like collate all that data. And so that's one of the very practical pieces in automation that Virtuous does is it does that work for you. It does the looking and the finding and the data gathering, and just presents it to you nicely to say, hey, this person has made a gift that has pushed them over the threshold. We've done the work for you. Now go do the celebrating with the donor. And so that's always nice, because it does take some of that work out of a small team working with a large group of donors.
Absolutely. So Stephanie, how does this work in Virtuous? Can you show us?
Oh,
like, if I want to make this happen at my imaginary nonprofit using Virtuous, what do I do?
Absolutely. Well, really quick. So I'll pop over to the database, but one of the easiest ways that we can do things like, milestones, or honestly, even I'm trying to think how to, even just segmenting donors is using tags. And so tagging in the system allows us to kind of use that as a baseline to grow automations and things. So let me actually pop over. So one of the things that we actually have kind of baked into Virtuous just right out of the box is some best practice templates for automation. And so this is actually, we've taken the steps and said, here are some great ways to look at things like, milestones, celebrations, life cycles, things like that you really just kind of have to tweak and put the details into your organization, identify what major donor means, set some parameters, things like that. But we've actually built some of these. So you mentioned one of them was the event follow-up. You go to an event, that's that first step that triggers something. The next thing should be, thank you for coming to the event. What's, some feedback you have to share. How do you want to get involved now that you know a little bit more? Things like that. So some of these best practice workflows are really just that, where we can celebrate some of these milestones of volunteering. The birthday's a really awesome one. You can also turn that into something like donor anniversaries. So maybe you want to celebrate the first time someone gave, and then every year after that, and celebrate that donorversary, if you will. So there's a lot of really easy ways to look at automation within Virtuous. And it really is as simple as, let me do this, webinar automation, so I know later. This is my sandbox environment. There's a lot of fun things in here. But so in automation, a workflow can be as simple as, when someone's birthday is coming up, send them a postcard to say happy birthday. And then when it's their actual day, send them the email that says happy birthday. I mean, you could easily swap this out with donor anniversary, sending a postcard to say something like, in this last year that you've been giving and participating and working with us, you've been able to help us impact, X amount of children, or do this amount of work, or be involved in this amount of hours, something like that. And I mean, it really is as simple as just kind of popping up the best practice and then doing a little bit of tweaking in here to say exactly what do you want this postcard to say, things like that. But that idea of the best practice templates, it's baked into Virtuous. So it's a wonderful place to start. And you've got things that are, just celebrating with your donors throughout the years and your experience in working with them, to things like donor retention. This has a huge return on investment for all the things that you're working with. We talk all the time about how, a donor can come into your system and so easily be lost after that first gift or after that first interaction. How do you work with them over time and continually engage them and thank them, things like that? So, I mean, the best practice workflows are amazing and just a really great place to start.
Yeah, seems so encouraging to me, thinking about like trying to do this kind of work without Virtuous in the long ago times past, of how you're always just kind of like, I know that these donors have a personal connection to our organization, that there is like, that generosity is so personal, and they have that. And then I, as one person, how do I keep that going? Or as a small team, how do I honor that and keep that going? And having those templates and workflows all set so that it's kind of running in the background without me having to try to keep it all in my head, that seems just like magical.
Well, and it's nice because, I mean, you think about automation and you might think impersonal, and that's not what it is at all. The automation aspect, especially of what we can do in Virtuous, is a lot of the back end work stuff. So that, running some reports and finding someone that meets this criteria that you've set up, that's the stuff that takes forever. And that's the stuff that automation can really you can harness using automation. So you're still following up with your donors personally. It's not a robotic sense of working with them. So again, I just pulled up just a sample of donor retention. I mean, you can see all these emails, but outside of those emails that, yes, the system is sending on your behalf, we've got follow-up calls, we've got note cards, we've got personal emails. So there is that human touch point. Virtuous is just doing the hunt and find for you. And that's the piece that, you can really, really harness within automation to say, I don't have the time to figure out who is, pre-lapsed or who has lapsed that I need to reach out to. Virtuous can do that piece of it, and you can still have that human interaction with your donors. So I think that's, one of the really cool things about automation.
Yeah, thinking about lapsed donors too, of having everything happen in real time, where it just alerts you and things are happening, instead of I got to go through, I don't know, every 6 months,
pull reports,
once a year, and pull some reports and see what happened. And then by the time I reach out to someone, it's been 18 months since they gave, and they're like, who are you? Did I give to you? I don't remember. But instead having it going. So once you build those workflows, you can just let them work and do the work.
And that's where we talked earlier about, every donor's kind of on their own path. So it's not that, every day you have to do every single one of these tasks. And again, this is an overwhelming looking screen as a template and a big example. But if you were doing this yourself, you'd have to run a report to find who needs this email, then who needs this one, and then who needs this one. And so it's taking all of that time because you do have donors at different stages in their relationship with you. And so that's the piece that just is kind of the game changer of it. And so it allows you to think bigger picture. How do I want to interact with, these donors that are about to lapse? Okay, how do I want to interact with the ones that have lapsed? And so you get to focus on the connection piece. So I think that's one of the coolest parts for me is, again, if you were doing this manually, you'd be running a report, finding out who needs this email, running a report, finding out who needs this one. That's the stuff that just makes my head spin a little bit, that I'm like, no, thank you. Virtuous can definitely do that for me.
And ultimately that frees up so much time for relationship building, for whatever that means for you.
Much.
our second case study we're going to take a look at today, and we'll just go real quick, I think, because we're already 2/3 of the way through this session. There's so much to say.
This is the danger, Megan. You get me into actual Virtuous database, and I'm like, okay, well now I'm going to just talk forever.
I know. I feel that way about responsive fundraising, that I'm like, would you like to talk about this whole framework? How about for several hours? So we're looking at Chicanos por la Casa, who also used automation for responsive communications, especially responsive email streams. And this is super important because Veronica, their donor relations manager, manages individual giving herself. So it is, again, a thing of one fundraiser trying to personally interact with as many people as possible. So she found that setting up automation workflows really changed how much time she had for all the other things that she had to do. Because an individual donor can mean a lot of things, right? It's like, I am an individual donor when I give $5 to the nonprofit of my choice. And so I am also an individual donor when I make a major gift. We'll pretend I make major gifts. When I get libraries named after me, I am also still an individual donor. And so one person managing both ends of that scale of giving is still, like, the giving is different, but the generosity is the same. People are generous no matter what the amount of their gift is. So being able to honor and engage everyone in that relationship is important, but doing that at scale when you have, again, more than 10 donors is tricky. So they're using a lot of automations to get their general communications more targeted and to flow, and to keep everything going with like the big group of individual donors. And that frees up time for that one-on-one major donor development that also needs to happen. So one of the things I thought was really interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
I have so much
sorry, I think my internet's a little delayed here, Megan. I'm so sorry. I was just going to say, we joke a lot on the training team that, when you're thinking about automation, what's the next thing you want to do with your donor? The vast majority of the time it's saying thank you. Because to your point, it's the generosity is the same, whether it is $5 or a lot of money and you get a library named after you. It's that next step a lot of times still is thank you. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for participating. Thank you for walking this walk with us. So I love that, like, again, you can scale that thank you however you need, but it's thank you's the next step.
Yes, that's such a great reminder too. I think it's easy to just think of donor journeys like, what do they do next? What do we need to convince them to do somehow? And it's like, well, they'll probably have their own idea, but we know we need to celebrate their generosity.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I loved that Veronica pointed out is that when you can be responsive, when you can respond to the people who are responding to you, that builds transparency and authenticity with your organization, that you become more trustworthy because there's somebody there who they feel like they know and they can reach out to. So automation can actually help you bring that one-to-one relationship to anyone who wants it. And will some people just read your email and be like, cool, that's great. Sounds like they're doing a good job. I'll continue supporting, hooray. And then probably most of them will. And then a few people will say, actually, I had a question. Actually, I want to know more about that. Can you tell me about volunteer opportunities? So that you can, when you have a device for communicating in a relevant way, people can start to communicate back, which is exciting. So yeah, she freed up a lot more time for one-on-one relationships and had donor journeys that created personalized experiences. And so one of the ways that happens is, can we talk a little bit about tagging and segmenting?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. So in Virtuous, one of the easiest ways to kind of group people, if you will, is tagging. And so if you're looking at different donor segments of I've identified what major donor means to me. I've identified what, a pre-lapse donor means. I've identified what a recurring giver, those kinds of things. Once you've identified those definitions, it's so easy. You can either run queries and pull lists of people that meet that criteria and then just tag them. So tags in Virtuous are just an easy way to kind of group people together. And so it's the easiest segmentation to do is, non-donor, major donor, monthly donor, things like that. So you're just looking at these big groups of donors and saying, how are they interacting? How are they giving? What type of donation and gift is coming from them? So that way you can target those communications. If you have a group of major donors, you're going to have a very different conversation with them than a group of lapsed donors. So segmenting those out and saying, this is the criteria we're going to use, and this is how we'll recognize them. It's as simple as tagging them in Virtuous. So actually, let me go back to the database, which is the dangerous game to play with Stephanie, always. So I'm here, I've got all of my contacts here, and I want to see whose tag is any of, here we go. Major donor. I'm trying to think how all the tags that I've gotten my. I always have weird tags too. I think I've got one about dogs.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to pretend that there might be more than major donor. Oh, perfect. Clean water. Major donor.
They've got a program and a giving level.
There you go. These 250 contacts right here are already identified as that type of giver with that interest. So it really is as simple as just tagging them. And maybe this group here, since they're interested in clean water and they are major donors, maybe this is the easiest gateway to get someone interested in another project. And so I can tag them with another thing. Maybe we're going to be doing kind of a spin-off project or something like that. Pulling this list and identifying who falls into these categories, and then you can bulk add another tag to them. So perhaps again, it's, we're doing a spin-off initiative from clean water. These people are already interested in that. They're most likely interested in something else. Then I can tag them and group them another way, and then communicate with them specifically to their financial giving level, their interest, things like that. So tags are awesome. And when you're looking at the donor itself, pulling up and you're seeing what are they grouped with, how are we deciding, to label and help understand them more.
Well, this is so exciting. I can't believe we're almost already at minute 30 already. This was our first time, so we didn't actually know how long this would take. I think we can say we have adequate material to continue to have these sessions. If you want to share your customer success story, if you're doing something and it's working well and you want to talk about it, I'd love to hear from you. We'd love to feature you in this very spotlight so that everyone in the community can learn from the things that you have learned. Reach out to me. That's great. Next week's pretty exciting.
So next week, we actually get to put Scott Richards, our director of training, in the fake dunk tank and throw all of our questions at him. So Scott and I will be kind of running through a queue of questions and just answering them live. So you can always, if you think of something in the next week, toss them into the chat during that session. But if you do already have some questions right now that you can think of that you want to get answered, you can go ahead and send them in an email to us at training@virtuous.org. Andre, I did see your question in the chat right now, so I will just pull that and we can address that as one of our dunk tank questions. But the goal is we're going to try and stump Scott. So it's hard to do, but that's the plan. So send us some questions. What are some things you're kind of wondering about, best practices, thoughts on, I just need help with this. I need an idea. give us those questions. We're ready.
Absolutely. And something else is happening next week that hopefully you've all heard of already. But if not, I'll tell you now. It's the Responsive Nonprofit Summit, which is 2 days on April 14th and 15th, full of free virtual learning. And if you would like to learn more about it, visit virtuous.org/summit. We hope you can join us. It should be a good time. We have a lot of great speakers and a lot of good things to learn about. Stephanie, this was so much fun.
Thank you, Megan. Like I said, it's dangerous to get me in the database, but thank you for listening to me. But it was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all for attending. We're looking forward to this series, and we're really just grateful that you're spending the time with us. And we'll see you soon. Bye,
Have a
everybody.
happy Thursday, everybody.